He failed again. Not in a loud way. Not in a way that shattered the world around him. Just another quiet fall, the kind that only the heart truly feels. There is a certain silence that follows failure. It is heavier than noise. It lingers in the air as if even the walls are watching. He could feel it settle around him. The stillness, the waiting, not always with words. Sometimes it was only a glance. Sometimes a small shift in posture. Sometimes the absence of comfort. Sometimes the absence of comfort, but he felt it. The unspoken question hanging in the air. Again, Haya tried, truly tried, with careful steps and steady hands, with hope tucked quietly inside his chest. But hope, when it stumbles, makes a very soft sound. Almost no one hears it, except the one who carries it. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from failing more than once. The first time, there is surprise. The second time, there is doubt. By the third, something begins to ache more deeply. Not the body, but the sense of worth. He began to wonder what they saw when they looked at him. Did they see effort or only outcome? Did they see the nights he lay awake, replaying every step, or only the final result? If he never asked them. He carried the questions alone. When he walked past them, he could feel the quiet judgment in the air. It was not shouted. It did not need to be. Silence can speak in very sharp ways. There is something uncomfortable about being seen as the one who keeps falling. It slowly presses against the edges of the mind. It whispers small things. Maybe you are not meant for this. Maybe you are less than you believed. Maybe they were right. He did not argue with those whispers. He simply listened, and listening made them stronger. But there was something else, too, beneath the doubt. Beneath the sting of being observed, a quiet awareness. He noticed how quickly people expect recovery, how easily they measure strength by speed. If you fall, stand quickly. If you fail, explain quickly. If you hurt, hide it quickly. They were waiting for something from him, an excuse, a defense, a display of frustration, anything that would ease their discomfort. But he did none of those things. He simply stood there in the space between failure and reaction. It is not easy to remain still when eyes are on you. The body wants to move. The mouth wants to speak. The heart wants to protect itself. He felt that urge rising inside him like a wave, to justify, to prove, to push back against the silent judgment pressing toward him, but he did not. Instead, he allowed the moment to stretch. He allowed the discomfort to exist without covering it. He allowed the weight of it to settle fully on his shoulders. Why? Why did? Perhaps because something inside him was tired of fighting every shadow, tired of explaining every fall, tired of trying to shape their understanding. There is a strange power in not reacting immediately. It feels weak at first, almost like surrender. But sometimes it is not surrender at all. Sometimes it is observation. He began to notice their reactions more clearly. When he stopped reacting himself, he saw how quickly they looked away when he did not defend himself, how their whispers softened when he did not feed them. Failure, he realized, is not only about the thing that did not succeed. It is also about the space that follows it, the space where character is quietly revealed, and in that space, something was changing. He had failed again, yes, but for the first time, he did not rush to escape the feeling. He stayed. He listened to the silence, and in that silence something unexpected began to take root. Well, their doubts did not arrive all at once. They gathered slowly, like clouds that seem harmless at first. A look held for a second too long, a sigh that carried more meaning than sound, a conversation that stopped when he entered the room. No one said the words directly. They did not need to. He could feel them. There is a way doubt moves through a space. It shifts the air. It makes you aware of yourself in ways that feel heavy. Suddenly, every movement seems observed. Every silence seems judged. He felt smaller under those quiet eyes. It is not easy to carry failure when others are counting it. It is even harder when they begin to expect it. When the next fall feels less like a surprise and more like a prediction already made. He sensed that prediction forming around him again. They thought. He could almost hear it without hearing it. At first, he wanted to argue with that invisible sentence. He wanted to gather every effort he had made, every unseen sacrifice, and lay it out before them like proof. He wanted them to understand how much he had tried. Isn't it natural to want to be understood? Isn't it human to want someone to see the struggle behind the result? The urge to explain rose within him more than once. It pressed against his chest. It reached his throat. Words formed, ready to defend his effort, ready to soften their doubt. But something stopped him. It was not pride. It was not anger. It was a quiet hesitation. He began to wonder if he spoke, would they truly hear him? Or would they only listen long enough to protect their own belief about him? Sometimes people do not want the truth. They want confirmation of what they already decided. This thought settled gently inside him. Not bitter, not sharp, just clear, and so he remained silent. The silence felt uncomfortable at first, like standing in cold water and waiting for the body to adjust. He felt exposed without his explanations, unprotected without his defenses. They misread it. Of course they did. To them, his quiet became weakness. His restraint became defeat. They filled the space he left open with their own stories. He saw it in their eyes. There is a certain expression people wear when they believe they have understood you completely. It is calm, certain, almost satisfied. He saw that look more than once. They believed they knew why he failed. They believed they knew what he lacked. They believed the pattern was clear, and still he said nothing. Inside him, however, there was movement, a quiet wrestling, a deep and private struggle between pride and patience. Should he defend himself? Should he correct them? Should he fight the story being written about him? Of his each Question came softly, but carried weight. He realized something slowly, like a thought rising from deep water. Every reaction would only bind him tighter to their judgment. Every defense would invite another doubt. Every explanation would open another door for misunderstanding. Silence, though painful, closed those doors. It did not change their minds. It did not erase their assumptions, but it protected something within him, his dignity. There is a kind of strength that does not rush to clear its name. It waits. It watches. It allows time to reveal what words cannot. He began to understand that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every doubt deserves an answer. Some things grow stronger when left unchallenged. Some storms pass when not fed by wind. And so he endured the quiet weight of being misunderstood. He let them think what they would. He let the air feel heavy. He let the glances linger without chasing them away. It was not easy. There were nights when the silence felt too loud inside his own mind, when he replayed their looks and imagined the things they might have said when he was not there. But even then, he held back from reacting. He was learning something subtle, that self-control is not about suppressing emotion. It is about choosing which emotions deserve movement. And in choosing stillness, he began to feel a strange shift. Their doubts were loud, but his quiet was deeper. And for the first time, he wondered which one would last longer. They thought his silence was weakness. It was a quiet mistake, one that happens easily when someone chooses stillness over reaction. They looked for cracks. They listened for sighs. They waited for him to stumble in words, to let his frustrations spill. They expected a storm. But the storm never came. He learned to notice the small ways they misjudged him. How quickly they filled the empty spaces with their own stories. How easily they turned his restraint into proof of what they already believed. It was almost fascinating, if it were not so heavy. He had tried in the past to explain, to correct the assumptions that clung to him like shadows, and every time he did, he felt more bound. The words left him exhausted. The explanations changed nothing. They listened, nodded, and then returned to their own certainty. And so he stopped. At first, it felt strange to allow himself to be misunderstood. Strange to let them build their own story about him while he stood quietly outside it. There was an ache in the chest, a small knot of doubt that whispered, "Perhaps they are right. Perhaps I should say something. Perhaps silence is too much to bear." But he waited and watched. He noticed how quickly they lost patience when he said nothing. How they twisted their own discomfort into judgment. How their need to explain him was louder than any truth he could offer. And he began to see the subtle ways they measured strength, how they mistook noise for power, reaction for resilience, argument for courage. And he realized they could not provoke him. Not truly. Every glance that sought to pierce him, every whispered assumption, every unasked question fell away like water on stone, because he had learned to see the difference between what belonged to them and what belonged to him. Silence is not empty. He discovered this slowly, over long moments of quiet observation. It is not weakness. It is a place where the heart learns to be steady, where the mind can untangle itself from the chaos of others' expectations, where the self begins to remember its own measure. They could not see it. They could only guess. They could only project their own ideas onto him. And in that projection, he was free. Free from their need to judge. Free from their need to understand. Free from the pressure to prove. He noticed, too, how quickly some would assume that quiet meant defeat. They thought restraint was surrender. They thought patience was ignorance. They misread him at every turn, and yet he felt no need to correct them, because he was learning a quiet lesson. Some strength is revealed not by what is said, but by what is held back. Some victories are invisible, but no less real for being unseen. Some power grows in the absence of applause. He felt the subtle shift within himself. A growing calm, a deeper confidence. It was not loud. It did not demand recognition, but it was there, steady as a candle burning in a dark room. He began to understand that self-respect is not something you announce. It is not proven by argument or defense. It is nurtured quietly, in the choices to remain centered, in the moments when you do not need to explain yourself, in the gentle holding of your own truth, even when others misinterpret it. And still, they misread him. Of course they did. People always see what they are ready to see. They always measure the world by what the dead, I believe, not what is. And he accepted that. He let them fill the silence with their own stories. He let their assumptions linger without disturbing him. It was not always easy. There were times when the quiet pressed against him, heavy with expectation, with the imagined disappointment in their eyes. But he stayed. He let the discomfort sit without feeding it. He let their misunderstanding exist without changing himself to fit it. And slowly he discovered a strange truth. Their misunderstanding could not touch the part of him that remained unshaken. Their assumptions could not reach the calm that had begun to grow in his chest. Their projections could not alter the quiet power he had learned to carry. He realized that strength need not be loud. That patience is often more powerful than argument. That silence, when chosen with intention, holds a weight that no misunderstanding can diminish. In that quiet, he was building something unbreakable, something they could not see, something they could never provoke. He had become a presence that required no approval, no explanation, no defense, a presence that was quietly, firmly, entirely his own fire. And in that presence, he felt a freedom deeper than any victory they could imagine. For a long time, he had waited for something to happen. Some moment of recognition, some sign that all the quiet effort and restraint had meant something. And then he realized, softly, that nothing had to happen at all. He did not need applause. He did not need their understanding. He did not need the world to mark his presence with approval or acknowledgement. It had been there all along, quietly, in the spaces he had held for himself. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing the eyes of others, when the weight of expectation lifts because you no longer carry it, when the world can judge or misunderstand, and yet it too has nothing inside you. Have you ever felt that stillness, the kind that hums quietly beneath the surface, where no one can disturb it? He felt it now, not as a victory, not as triumph, not as something to announce, but as a steady pulse, slow and sure, like a river moving beneath ice. It was calm, unshakable, and entirely his own. He remembered all the times he had faltered, the times they had watched and waited. He remembered the weight of their doubt pressing in, the discomfort of being misunderstood, the pull to react and defend himself. And he realized how much he had grown in those moments of quiet endurance. It was not in their eyes that he had found strength. It was in the patient observing of himself, in the choice to hold silence instead of reaction, in the willingness to endure their misunderstanding without letting it break him. He had learned that true power does not shout. It does not announce itself. It does not announce itself. It does not need to prove itself to anyone. It exists quietly, like a flame that burns steadily, even when the wind blows, even when the night deepens around it. There is a strange joy in such quiet power, not the kind that fills the chest with pride or demands attention. A gentler, deeper joy. The kind that feels like arriving home after a long journey. The kind that allows the heart to breathe without fear, without hurry, without expectation. He felt his mind soften. The tension that had built over years of trying to meet others' eyes and match their expectations began to release. He could rest in himself. He could watch the world continue its judgments and assumptions and remain untouched. It was in that stillness that he finally understood what self-respect truly meant. It was not held in words, nor in victories, nor in recognition. It was in the quiet decision to honor his own measure, to preserve his own dignity, to protect the space where his life could flourish without disturbance. He thought of all the small moments of restraint, the times he had chosen silence over reaction, the times he had endured being misunderstood. Each one had been a quiet step toward this moment. Each one had strengthened him in ways no one else could see. And he realized something profound. The world would always have opinions, always have doubt, always look for weakness, but none of it could touch the part of him that had learned to stand quietly, firmly, and peacefully within itself. He did not need them to understand. He did not need their approval. He did not need their approval. He did not even need their acknowledgement. He had discovered the life that exists beneath all judgment, beneath all expectation, beneath the pressing weight of others' eyes. And in that discovery, he felt a calm, so complete it seemed to settle in every part of him. The restlessness, the tension, the ache of proving himself, they were no longer there. He had learned to trust the quiet rhythm of his own presence. There was nothing dramatic, no grand revelation, no sudden change, only the gentle unfolding of understanding, the soft, steady growth of inner strength, the quiet knowledge that he was enough. And so he let the moment rest. He let the silence wrap around him like a familiar blanket. He allowed himself to breathe deeply, slowly, and feel the gentle certainty that comes when a soul no longer seeks its reflection in the eyes of others. He had failed again, yes. He had been misunderstood, yes. But in that quiet self-respect, in that calm endurance, in that unshakable inner presence, he was no longer failing at all. He closed his eyes softly, listening to the subtle rhythm of his own heartbeat. And for the first time in a long time, he felt entirely at peace. The world could continue as it would, and he would remain quietly, deeply, and wholly himself.